Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudes, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's show is called We Are All in This Together. Thanks to DC TV and Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Maurice Jackson on audio and prompter, and Jamie Fain, floor director. First, I'll give you some background. DC TV has broadcast this weekly series on the network of global corporate control for a year and a half. In our last live show on November 15th, I told you that the 189 ministers of finance and development on the board of governors of the World Bank have authorized me to speak for the United States on the board of governors. I showed you how I had cleared with the board of governors the press release authorizing the global currency reset, and I asked the 189 member countries to go on record if this was incorrect. In my recent tweet, I reminded the Board of Governors that the minutes of the annual meeting approving the global currency reset are standing. And that tweet went out on, I don't have the exact date, but I put the minutes there and I asked for any statements contradicting the annual meeting. I put the archives of this series on DC TV up on the internet, either on YouTube or when YouTube censors the shows or the comments, I post them elsewhere on the internet. YouTube is owned by Google, and Google was created by the CIA. And in the teleprompter that I also tweet and put up on YouTube, you can get links and see all the documents. If you ever have any questions, ask me about them. I document every single statement that I make. In 2011, 3 mathematicians, Stefania Vitali, James Glatfelder, and Stefano Battiston at the Zurich, Switzerland University, the Federal Institute of Technology, identified a network of global corporate control. This network is often referred to as the Banking Cartel. Actually, the team that's helping me in the fight against the Banking Cartel gives me on-the-job training and continuous feedback in my social media. I tweeted on November 20th, "We will all sink or swim together." And I said on DC TV 2 weeks ago, "We are reflected in all other men are embodied in us." I'm asking those who have been with our series from the beginning to bear with us as we bring the newbies up to speed. I told you at the beginning of this series what to watch for: people losing faith in the journalism and legal professions. This means that they're wising up to the corruption, and whether Germany and Japan were switching out of the Atlantic Alliance. The only way to keep this from happening was to clean up the corruption. People are struggling to find ways of engaging with others who are reluctant to acknowledge the depth of the corruption. One reader calls this the normalcy bias. Actually, after 9/11, it seems that most normal people are questioning what is reality. On the 23rd of November, the European Parliament approved a draft resolution to raise awareness within the European Union in the face of what it called Kremlin propaganda, and they equated the Sputnik news agency and RT TV broadcasts to Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and other violent jihadi terrorist groups. Sputnik News said that the European Parliament's resolution was the beginning of the end of this system, and their headline said the EU propaganda resolution was like Pinocchio calling his maker a liar. I commented on this article in a tweet, and I said the beginning of the end of this system. Yes, 95% likely that we're at the beginning of the end of this system, which depends upon domination of the media by the network of global corporate control. The end of this system: no more usury to the banking cartel. All country indebtedness can and should be offset against the $2 quadrillion in Treaty of Versailles bonds and compounded interest that was issued by the Federal Reserve Bank in the 1930s. The Sirius report said that 9/11 was the end of an era. I discussed this on DC TV last month, and I said, my comments are frequently not published, and so I post them anyway, which is what I did with a comment last month from an article in the Sirius report about how 9/11 signaled the end of an empire and an era, although nobody knew the name of the empire. My comment named the empire as the network of global corporate control, and I have a picture which accompanied the article. I'm a lawyer and economist who has blown the whistle on the legal profession, the accounting profession, the journalists, the U.S. Congress, and the rest of the 1%ers after working in the World Bank's legal department for more than 20 years. Because it was my job at the World Bank in their legal department to keep the World Bank's financial statements honest, I spotted the corruption ahead of everyone else, most everyone else. And when Jacek Kugler, a political scientist who developed an accurate power transition model for the United States National War College, came to the World Bank in 2004, I knew where the coalitions to fight the corruption were. And here is a quote from an article that I just retweeted. Quote, "Dominoes beginning to fall. This is just the latest organized attack on a global financial system rigged by corrupt governments and the multinational corporations that control them." In 1976, I wrote a legislative history of the G77, and in 1986, the General Counsel of the World Bank, Ibrahim Shihada, hired me into the World Bank's legal department. Shihada was an Egyptian lawyer who had served as the General Counsel of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries before he came to the World Bank. I've been working with the Coalition for the Rule of Law ever since. In 2013, I found out about the world's wealth that Ferdinand Marcos, as the lawyer for Jose Rizal, placed in a trust for humanity, and that the 189 ministers of finance on the Board of Governors of the World Bank administer this trust, which is called the Global Debt Facility. And I have an inventory list of the assets in the Global Debt Facility. This includes 1,700,000 metric tons of the world's monetary gold reserves, art treasures, gemstones, and I uploaded a video on YouTube recently which shows some of the bank accounts that are owned by the Global Debt Facility. I used the assets in the Global Debt Facility to file a notarial protest against the Fed with the Universal Postal Union, showing that the United States monetary gold reserves were in the Global Debt Facility and not in the Federal Reserve, or Fort Worth for that matter. The bonds that the Fed issued in the 1930s in exchange for the elite's gold are called Treaty of Versailles bonds. Jose Rizal became the agent for the elites on the Treaty of Versailles bonds. The Treaty of Versailles bonds are in the Global Debt Facility. The Fed is bankrupt because Treaty of Versailles bonds are now worth more than $2 quadrillion, but when you include the interest that has been accruing since the 1930s and compounding on the Treaty of Versailles bonds. The Treaty of Versailles bonds cancel country debt. What does this mean? Interest on country debt is paid to the Banking Cartel, and that is just a scam. The Grace Commission, which was put together by Ronald Reagan, showed that income taxes were going to the Banking Cartel to pay that scam called country debt. After the global currency reset, we are not going to pay interest on country debt to the Banking Cartel. I filed financing statements in each of the 10 states where the Federal Reserve banks are located with the Secretaries of State. All of the Ministers of Finance on the Board of Governors cleared my letter to Jesse White, who is the Secretary of State of Illinois, telling Jesse White that the financing statements against the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago remain valid. The Board of Governors also cleared a press release announcing the global currency reset. I've been working in a team with other players during each stage of the project to end the corruption from the banking cartel. Ever since 2004, I had a very good blueprint from the United States Department of Defense National War College, the power transition model. Before 2004, I hired Larry Garrison as my PR guy, and Larry stood by me. The power transition model predicts with 90 to 95 track record for accuracy how coalitions form. I have known since 2004 from the power transition model that it was possible to end the corruption at the World Bank. 134 developing countries in the G77 are at the very heart of the coalition fighting the banking cartel. And here is a quote from an article that I just retweeted. Quote, "Dominoes beginning to fall. This is just the latest organized attack on a global financial system rigged by corrupt governments and the multinational corporations that control them." Close quote. As I've said before, we are on a one-way street as more and more of the corruption and crooks are exposed. I am now accountable to the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF and everyone else. I'm using the structured commercial lien process to bankrupt the agents of the banking cartel that are harming me personally by corrupt interference with the global currency reset. I told everyone how this was going to happen 10 days ago in a tweet. And you can see that tweet in the teleprompter. So 3 days ago, Mossy Shire asked me whether President-elect Trump was informed about any of my, quote, valuable information. And she gave me some continued prayers and said, "God bless you." And I responded, yes, Donald Trump is trying to surrender the United States, and I called him on it. Trump answers to the global debt facility containing the U.S. and rest of the world's monetary gold reserves, or he's bankrupt. All of the United States' 1,800,000 metric tons of gold, which are also part of the other countries' monetary gold reserves, are in the global debt facility. And now I'm going to read you what I sent to Donald Trump. And I also sent this to the mayor of the District of Columbia. I sent it to Renwick Payne, who's the Adjutant General of the District of Columbia. He's on the National Guard. He's supposed to make sure that the UN troops are not on U.S. soil because there's been no consent for that. I also sent this commercial lien to Joseph Dunford, Jr., who's claiming that he has the right to govern the United States under martial law because the Congress has been suspending our Constitution of 1789. And of course, Donald Trump cannot be elected if there's no electoral college. And I wrote to the Electoral College and told them about that, and I put that up on the internet as well. So we are now in something called interregnum. That means that there is no legitimate government in the United States. So let me read you from the commercial lien, which, as I said, after I give the people who received this the opportunity to rebut the facts that I have stated there. If they don't want to rebut them, then there's a judgment against them, and they owe us 1,800,000 metric tons of gold because they're interfering with the deployment of the global currency reset. Okay, so this is my affidavit. Ray, your account payable owed 1,800,000 metric tons of gold plus other assets in TVM LSM 666. Now, those are the initials of Ferdinand Marcos's son, and there's also been some discussion about what the number 666 is. It's actually three numbers, 600, 60, and 6, and this all means humanity. And it's owed to the lien claimants. That means it's owed to the global debt facility, and all of humanity are the beneficiaries of the global debt facility, and it's owed to the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development for lawbreaking, unlawful, damaging acts committed against secured parties. That's the global debt facility by you under the color of the Articles of Agreement of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. That's the oldest agency of the World Bank, and International Monetary Fund, state and federal laws, codes, rules, regulations, statutes, actual and common law, all while acting in concert. Dear agents, principals, unknown entities, and insurers, whereas the unchanging principles of commerce are applied to this instrument, I, Karen Hudes, whom you have wronged, declare under penalty of perjury the Articles of Agreement of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and IMF, constitutions and laws, that the following is true, correct, and not misleading. 1. A matter must be expressed to be resolved. 2. The eternal, unchanged principles of commercial law are A. A workman is worthy of his hire. Thou shalt not steal. B. All are equal under the law. No one is above the law. C. In commerce, truth is sovereign. Thou shalt not bear false witness. D. Truth is expressed in the form of an affidavit. E. An unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in commerce. F. An unrebutted affidavit becomes the judgment in commerce. G. All matters must be expressed to be resolved. H. He who leaves the battlefield first loses by default. I. Sacrifice is the measure of credibility. No willingness to sacrifice equals no liability, responsibility, authority, or measure of conviction. J. A lien or claim can be satisfied only through an affidavit by a point-for-point rebuttal or by payment in full. 3. All are presumed to know the law, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. 4. Fraud and justice never dwell together. 5. I am middle-aged and am competent to make this affidavit. 6. I have personal knowledge of the facts stated herein. 7. I am my own flesh and blood, breathing woman on the land of the Americas, being and not a government-created legal fiction. 8. I recognize the Constitution of 1787, the Bill of Rights, 1776, ratified in 1791, and precedent decisions of Article 3 Justice Courts of Law and the law merchant. 9. The law merchant being the foundation of commercial law based upon certain eternally just, valid, and moral precepts and truth which have remained unchanged for 6,000 years, having its roots in Mosaic law. 10. Said commercial law forms the underpinnings of Western civilization, if not all nations' law and commerce in this world. 11. Commercial law is non-judicial and is superior to, the basis of, and cannot be set aside or overruled by the statutes of any governments, legislatures, governmental or quasi-governmental agencies, courts, judges, and law enforcement agencies, which are under an inherent obligation to uphold said commercial law by my hand below. Okay, I'll just continue. And this is my declaration. I, Karen Hudes, declare that the following is true, correct, and not meant to mislead to the best of my knowledge. 13. The liability for malfeasance in office is in his/her private capacity, not his/her official capacity. 14. I am acting general counsel of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and legal counsel to TVM LSM 666, which contains the monetary gold reserves and other assets of the United States and other members of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and IMF. I am one of the 7 individuals authorized by the IBRD and IMF Board of Governors to oversee assets of TVM LSM 666 on behalf of humanity, which is the beneficiary of the Global Debt Facility. 15. The Board of Executive Directors of the IBRD reinstated me on August 20, 2009. The following day, my security badge was deactivated illegally, and I brought a bondholder lawsuit under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 to bring the IBRD into compliance. 16. Mary Shapiro, acting outside her duties as chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, refused to bring the IBRD into compliance and stonewalled an October 12, 2010 telephone call from the Serious Fraud Office of the United Kingdom. An inquiry by the European Parliament's Committee on Budgetary Control on May 25, 2011, as well as inquiries by the House of Commons International Committee. And then I've listed the 3 different times that I put statements up on the UK Parliament website, together with Elaine Colville. 17. The Board of Governors of the IBRD and IMF settled my bondholder litigation on December 20, 2012, by reaffirming the Board of Executive Directors' reinstatement of me as acting general counsel of the IBRD. Mahmoud Mohieddin, Jim Kim, Christine Lagarde, and the rest of the lien debtors acted outside of their official capacities by disregarding Article 5, Section 2A of the IBRD's Articles of Agreement, which provides all the powers of the bank shall be vested in the Board of Governors, and Article 5, Section 5, which requires lien debtors to respect the international character of my duty and obligates the lien debtors to refrain from all attempts to influence me in the discharge of my duties. That means that Donald Trump is not allowed to interfere with what I'm doing. 18. All of the above private individuals, by their nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance, interfered with my fiduciary duties as acting general counsel of the IBRD and legal counsel to the Global Debt Facility, and prevented me from returning the world's monetary gold reserves to the world's people, pursuant to the decision of the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF to carry out the global currency reset. And then I've got a link to all of the decisions taken by the Board of Governors. And then I've listed what was done by Barack Obama and some of the other people, because there's also, we've bankrupted them as well. And then let's move on to where we're dealing with the police chief in the District of Columbia. That's the former ones that all lost their jobs because of the corruption. That's J. Thomas Manger, Kathy Lanier, Melvin Gresham, and now the current interim chief of police in DC is Peter Newsham. They acted outside their respective duties as chief of police of Montgomery County, Maryland, president of the Major Cities Chiefs of Police Association, chief of police of the District of Columbia, and commander of the District of Columbia 2nd Precinct, by preventing my attendance of the Board of Governors' annual and spring meetings, my return to work at the IBRD's headquarters in Washington, D.C., damaging my reputation through illegal surveillance, assessments, and evictions, and other interference with my civil rights, including my illegal arrest and detainment on November 23 and 24, 2016. 24. Renwick Payne has failed in his duty to prevent a natural and civil emergency to defend the District of Columbia by accepting the monetary gold reserves of the United States administered under the bilateral Minesfield Breakthrough Successor Agreement dated August 11, 1950, and has refused to rescind all and any rights of UN peacekeeping troops on U.S. soil in the District of Columbia, and to defend the other states of the United States from similar incursions. 25. Joseph Dunford, Jr. is not entitled to the United States monetary gold reserves in the global debt facility. The attempt of Anna von Reitz to claim such monetary gold reserves for General Dunford was invalidated. Instead, General Dunford, Jr. and any secret successors, if such there be, are all relieved of their command under martial law. The secret martial law in the United States is illegitimate. General Dunford has no authority to perpetuate martial law because the governed have withdrawn their consent and there is no legitimacy. The attempt to reinstate General Dunford, Jr. as commander of the U.S. government under martial law has failed. The United States is in interregnum. 26. Muriel Bowser has perpetuated a corrupt business environment in the District of Columbia and prevented lien claimants, that's us, from implementing the global currency reset to incorporate the nation's monetary gold reserves contained in the trust administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund into national currencies for the exchange of corrupt, failing paper currencies issued by the Bank for International Settlements, central banks. Local currencies issued by towns and villages are also part of the global currency reset. Muriel Bowser has seen to a succession of unethical, corrupt police chiefs in the District of Columbia, all to perpetuate the corrupt business environment and jeopardize the continued employment in the District of Columbia. 27. Donald J. Trump has failed to acknowledge that the United States is not operating under the Constitution of 1789, nor has he acknowledged that the United States monetary gold reserves are administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund because they are in a trust established at the end of World War II by General Eisenhower and President Truman. Instead, Donald Trump has perpetuated the hoax on the American people despite having had the opportunity to rectify these falsehoods. Donald Trump has harmed me personally with these lies and falsehoods, as this has prevented me from returning to the World Bank's headquarters and working on the global currency reset agreed to by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, and returning the Constitution of 1789 of the United States via an Article 5 Constitutional Convention. And then I'm just talking about how the indebtedness is a scam. I'd like to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. I finished reading from the statement that went to Donald Trump, Joseph Dunford, Jr., Muriel Bowser, DC's mayor, and DC's interim chief of police, Peter Newsham, and the new Adjutant General of DC, Renwick Payne. These individuals are either going to prove that what I've said is untrue about their preventing the global currency reset by betraying their offices, or they owe all of us our gold. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudes.